Himalayas, a landscape of legends, fairy tales and dreams. Once accessible only to the gods, the Himalayas in Nepal now host around 100,000 visitors every year. Most trekkers return fulfilled, touched by the friendly people and breathtaking views. However, every year, some people do not return from the mountains. But with a little preparation, caution and wisdom, trekking in the Himalayas can be the trip of a lifetime. Nepal is a place of pilgrimage. Hindus and Buddhists come from around the world to visit sacred temples and the birthplace of Lord Buddha. Since it opened its doors to the West in 1950, the Hindu kingdom has attracted another kind of visitor, the adventurer. Some come for jungle safaris, to raft the rapids, explore the skies, and of course, to see the mountains. The Himalayas lure people for a different kind of pilgrimage, to trek through one of the natural wonders of our planet, to meet the people who call the Himalayas home, to challenge oneself physically, and for some, to reach the summits of the highest mountains in the world.
My opinion of anywhere to go, I think if they had a choice to go one place trekking, I think they should come here.
When I got here, I thought, no, this is just wonderful. It's a life-changing experience.
I expected it to be amazing, but I think it's been better than I thought it was going to be. Just huge mountains towering above you, and you really are in the wilderness.
It's so incredible to be in the Himalayas. I come from California. It's not that we don't have mountains, but nothing when you're standing at 15,000 feet and looking up to 25,000 feet. It's incredible. It's awe-inspiring.
The Himalayas hold a unique history of courage, triumph and tragedy. It wasn't until the 1970s that the idea of Himalayan trekking for tourists was born. These days you don't have to be an experienced mountaineer to stand at the foot of Mount Everest or Annapurna. The march to Everest Base Camp that took Hillary more than 3 weeks can now be done by almost anybody in 7 days. Nepal is one of the poorest countries in the world, and tourism has become vital to the Nepalese economy. Tourism also brings with it pollution, deforestation and erosion. Some organisations are working to decrease the impact of trekking on the environment. Kathmandu Environmental Education Project, the Annapurna Conservation Area Project, and the Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee all offer information to tourists on how to trek lightly and minimise their impact. Some lodges are also taking environmental initiatives.
Mostly we have big problem of wood here in National Park, and it is strictly prohibited to cut down the trees and the stones here. We use the kerosene and gas for the fuel here, and also for the light we use the wind rotor and solar power.
Trekkers need to consider their impact on the environment, but they also need to be prepared for the impact the environment will have on them. This is one of the only regions in the world where large volumes of people have access to high altitude. Most of Nepal's popular treks climb to altitudes of up to 5,500 metres, or 18,000 feet. At this altitude, people are breathing only 50% of the oxygen they are used to at sea level. One study in Nepal found that of those going to high altitude, above 4,000 metres, 42% had symptoms of acute mountain sickness.
Recently a woman did die. She apparently had symptoms for many days and didn't like to tell anybody because she didn't want to break the group up or separate herself from her friends. And she didn't want the group to feel upset because she had to go down. But we always say to people that the group will be much more upset if you happen to die on the way. And that does happen. It happens often enough to be pretty awful.
Often trekkers have tight itineraries and a determination to reach preset goals. Many trekkers have never been to high altitude before.
I do have a few concerns about altitude sickness, but we're in good hands. We've got John the guide and all the Sherpas and that, and he's very experienced, so he knows what he's doing, so it should be okay basically.
Altitude sickness does not discriminate between gender, fitness, age, or previous experience at altitude. It is also something that most people expect will not happen to them.
Yeah, I've had some experience with high mountain climbing and have never had a problem with altitude sickness, so I'm not expecting to have any now. We're not going as high as I've been before, so I figure I should be okay.
I never expected it, just because I do a lot in the mountains, and I spend a lot of time at elevation.
Coming up, I felt quite short of breath, and my steps were limited by my breath. Otherwise, I didn't have headache and I didn't have nausea. And that's a shortness of breath was really my only symptom.
The Himalayan Rescue Association plays a vital role in preventing deaths from altitude sickness and other mountain hazards. There is an HRA aid post in the Annapurna region at Manang and in the Everest region at Ferrochet. The posts are run during the trekking season by Nepali staff and volunteer doctors, who also give daily talks on altitude to passing trekkers. Around 2,500 people come to the talks each trekking season.
There was a study that showed about 30% of people who get to Ferrochet will have symptoms of AMS. Go up to Lobuche, which is the next step that most people go up to, 70% of people have AMS.
Formed in 1973, HRA is a non-profit organisation. The medical fees and donations paid by trekkers subsidises healthcare to porters and local villagers.
Going to altitude means acclimatising to altitude. You've got to go up in stages. You've got to listen to your body, and you've got to give your body time to adjust to that altitude, the lack of oxygen at altitude. That basically means that if you get the symptoms of acute mountain sickness, then you've just got to rest at that altitude until they clear.
I was crossing my fingers that I wouldn't get it, but apparently I've gotten some low-grade symptoms. I'm staying for a second night in the same hotel, and I've come over here to get some of the medication and drinking a ton of fluids. I'm trying to get 3 liters a day through me, so that's my preventative scheme right now.
The mechanism, or the pathophysiology as it is known, is due to the lack of oxygen causing perhaps leaky capillaries. You know, the capillaries are blood vessels, and because of a lack of oxygen in the brain or in the lungs, or these are the 2 important organs that are affected by high altitude, then they may start leaking.
If someone is not acclimatizing well to altitude, they may develop acute mountain sickness, or AMS. The first signs of AMS are a headache, accompanied by at least one other symptom, such as nausea, tiredness, poor sleep, or dizziness.
So when did you start feeling nauseated?
About 15 minutes ago.
Okay. It just came on suddenly, did it? You think you're going to vomit?
Sorry?
Are you going to vomit?
Yeah.
Waking up with altitude sickness was, of course, a disappointment after spending all that time training and, of course, the money to come here.
At 3,400 metres, Deborah had a headache, tiredness, and her nausea had become vomiting, the classic symptoms of AMS.
But it just hit me yesterday afternoon. It was fine until then.
So you couldn't sleep all night?
No. Sort of off and on. I kept her awake all night. It's the headache, and then it's just this feeling of nausea. So, it's just don't feel like moving. If my head didn't hurt so much, it would be better. But the head really is annoying. So, and it's right behind my eyes.
So you came up fairly quickly. It's a little bit quicker than...
Well, we spent a night at Manjo.
Yeah, okay. That's pretty quick. I mean, we spent 2 nights.
If someone with AMS is still coordinated and able to walk heel to toe, then their symptoms have not yet progressed to the more serious form, high altitude cerebral edema. Deborah passed the test. But if she had continued up with symptoms of AMS, her condition could rapidly deteriorate.
These symptoms of yours of persistent vomiting and severe headache, if you'd not been able to do that test, it would be cerebral edema, and you'd be off down the hill. In this case, it doesn't sound like that. So you can stay here and rest here and rehydrate and see how you feel. But you need to be kept an eye on, and if you deteriorate, you've got to go down.
We kind of really didn't have any expectations. I mean, we kind of made a joke of it, the 2 old babes in a yak tour. We kind of called it that in New York. We didn't expect any problems. We kind of wanted to see Mount Everest. That was the major goal. And everything else was kind of like icing on the cake.
Deborah improved remarkably with an extra day of rest at the same altitude. They decided not to go any higher, but were still hoping for the clouds to clear and give them a glimpse of Everest before heading home.
We'll see. We've seen it. We don't need to go.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, here we are.
Here we are.
This is what we came for, isn't it? Don't you feel great? It was worth it, wasn't it? Wasn't it worth it?
It was worth it.
Okay.
It was worth it.
If you do not listen to your body and keep going higher, then the benign symptoms of acute mountain sickness can progress into a more severe form, and this may be high altitude cerebral edema, okay, which means that there is fluid collection inside your skull now, and you need to go down.
In addition to the severe headache, nausea or vomiting, and extreme tiredness, neurological symptoms will also start to appear with HACE. Someone with HACE may be confused, disoriented, and ataxic, walking like a drunk, even unconscious.
This is a head scan, an MRI scan of someone who had high altitude cerebral edema. And if you will look here, this whitish mustache sort of appearance is the fluid in the brain. This is not supposed to be here. 6 months later, the mustache is gone. And this is the normal brain of the same gentleman that had high altitude cerebral edema.
Luis was carried down to the HRA clinic around midnight with high altitude cerebral edema. At 4,900 metres, he had had a bad headache and was confused, dizzy and exhausted. When he didn't recognise his wife, Martha, she realised it was serious.
We came in the middle of the night. We did 1 hour, I suppose. We were running. In every lodge we stopped, there's always a paper saying it could happen, the symptoms are this, but we never think it happens to us.
Well, I think because we get it too quickly. We have only 1 day of acclimatization. We have not very experienced.
High altitude pulmonary edema is another complication of acute mountain sickness. But unlike high altitude cerebral edema or HAZE, it may not present with the initial symptoms of headache and nausea, etc. It may, but it may not. And if it does not, it may just begin with excessive tiredness, excessive shortness of breath on slight exertion, some chest tightness, and a cough. And the cough may progress to blood-tinged sputum production. So these are important symptoms of HAPE.
I started with just a cough, the usual symptoms of a cold, and then I became more short of breath. I was very tired. I was exhausted. I had to pass my pack on to someone else.
I'd felt good the whole trip, and then last night wasn't sleeping very well, and then throughout the night about 12 o'clock or so started having difficulty breathing because of fluids in my lungs. Would you like to know? This is what it sounds like when I exhale.
Yeah.
So you can hear the fluid in there, and it's actually quite a bit better now. Last night, before I had taken any medications, I couldn't, if I exhaled or inhaled just slightly, not that heavily, you could hear that fluid, that crackling sound. So.
This is a chest x-ray of a person who suffered from high altitude pulmonary edema, or water in the lungs, and this is the water. This is supposed to be dark.
Well, I hate to be the bearer of the bad news in terms of your vacation time. See, your oxygenation is still pretty low. Our best bet is to get that helicopter in here as soon as possible, I think.
Acharya Kathmandu. हजुर सुन्दैछु
In some seasons, HRA does an emergency evacuation almost every day. Nobody wants their holiday to be interrupted by altitude sickness. It's common for people to ignore their symptoms or blame them on something else. Flu, dehydration, food poisoning, sunstroke, anything but altitude.
Once a bit headache, but I think it was because I was tired.
Deb initially just started to throw up, and again, you suspect at that point that maybe she's eaten something that's not agreeable to her system.
Started to get the headaches, and I thought, well, that's probably just me, and probably not so much the altitude. And I've done a lot of sports, and I figured, well, if I'm breathing hard, that's pretty normal. And as I kind of advanced up, it just didn't go away and didn't go away.
The only thing that comes to our mind is it's a flu, some headaches, and take these aspirins and let's go. We are here to see the mountains.
It took someone else to tell me that I had HAPE, and the reason for that was because I didn't want to stay behind in camp and not go up Kalapata. I wanted to go up very badly, and today, well, one of the Sherpas just carried me down, so like a baby on the back actually, so that was an experience.
The treatment for HAPE and HACE is descent, whether it be by porter, pony or helicopter. And a sick person should always be accompanied by a responsible friend. Oxygen, medication or a pressure bag, such as the Gamma bag or portable altitude chamber, will buy the person time and make them feel a lot better. But the cure is descent until symptoms disappear.
So there are 3 ways to prevent, to treat mountain sickness. Descent, descent, descent. In many cases, descent is not possible, either because you're too sick to descend, the weather is not correct, or if you're in a Tibetan plateau, there's just no place to descend to. And so the Gamma bag is actually an artificial descender. And it's the simulation of descent which is actually alleviates the symptoms of altitude sickness.
Every year in Nepal, people die preventable deaths from HAPE and HACE. But not all of them are trekkers.
On the way there's a bit of a sad incident when a porter died. He'd come up with another group and he got cerebral edema at Gokyo. And the leader there was called to see him at about 3 o'clock in the morning. He was pretty sick, nauseated, vomiting, couldn't stand. They put him in a bag, a pressure bag for 1 hour, and then he was sent down with another porter and one of the Sherpas, and he died on the way down. So one more dead porter, really sad.
A porter's dependency on their wages often makes them reluctant to admit symptoms. However, their heavy loads and inadequate clothing and shelter makes them particularly vulnerable.
Last year माथि 20 किलोमिटरबाट आउँदा के रे मलाई निकै बाटोमा जस हाई अल्टिट्युड लागेको जस्तै भयो अनि यो त्यस्तो हुँदाखेरि मलाई विदेशी यो कुहिराहरूले अस्पतालसम्म झार्यो.
So porters are 3 to 4 times more vulnerable than Westerners, and more at risk of death and injury. And people don't realise that. The International Porter Protection Group would really urge you to go trekking. It's a great form of aid. Hire lots of porters and get that money back out to the villages. But if you're taking them up, especially to high altitude or in bad weather, you've really got to attend to their clothing needs and to shelter at night time, possibly even their food in remote areas, and never send them down alone if they're sick. Someone responsible should go down with them. Stop porters from dying.
There are organisations working to make the Himalayas safer for porters. HRA treats porters at minimal cost, and newer organisations such as the International Porter Protection Group and Porters Progress provide education, training and a clothing bank for porters. Ultimately, trekkers themselves need to take responsibility for their porters and make sure they are treated well and return safely. Altitude sickness can be avoided, and deaths are easily preventable.
Our conservative recommendation is 300 meters per day. That's your sleeping altitude. So you actually may hike higher than that to kind of help with your acclimatization, but you want to aim to only sleep 300 meters higher than you slept the night before. And that will really help in terms of prevention. This is once you get over 3,000 meters or 10,000 feet.
The rate of ascent is one of the main tools in preventing altitude sickness. Higher than 3,000 metres, allowing for an extra rest day every 1,000 metres can make the difference between completing a trek or being evacuated.
Rest days can be the best day. They're some of the best days. And I think acute mountain sickness is actually designed to slow Westerners down and just get them to appreciate the surroundings and look at those mountains. Sit there and just watch people going by. Fantastic.
It gave Janet a great opportunity to tour Namche and have coffee in the wonderful coffee shops, call her husband. I'm so glad I gave her this wonderful experience, because had it not been for this, I would have forced her to walk up to Tengboche and she'd have been complaining the whole time.
Oh, Debbie, get out of here. You know I wouldn't have complained.
Overexertion is another contributing factor to AMS. Carrying a heavy pack or walking too far, too fast will put someone in a higher risk category.
It's also very important not to drink alcohol as you are ascending, because alcohol will suppress your breathing, especially at nighttime. And you don't want anything to suppress your breathing at high altitude. It also dehydrates you, alcohol does. So it's important to stay away from alcohol while ascending. And also, along the same line, it's important not to take sleeping pills.
Drinking 3 to 4 litres of water a day keeps the body hydrated and helps with acclimatisation. Dressing warmly, as well as reducing chances of HAPE, will also guard against hypothermia and frostbite. Sunglasses are also essential at high altitude to prevent snow blindness. People who go up slowly, have frequent rest days, stay warm and well hydrated, and don't ascend with symptoms will be the ones to return from their mountain adventures safe and satisfied.
मन आनन्द गरेर विस्तार विस्तार जानु हो भने त्यति हामीले उले चाहिँ यो नराम्रो यो चाहिँ पर्दैन त्यसलाई चाहिँ मैले यो सानो कुरामा अनुरोध गर्दैछु.
Well, we made it to the top of Gokyo-ri, which is one of the main goals on the Everest trek. On the way up, we met some people with headaches and pushing on. And I guess now that I'm here, I can see why people push on, because the view is magnificent. I can't help thinking it's not worth dying for. If you can make it, it's stunning. It's really beautiful.
It's a great place to come and be by yourself, just to really focus on what's happening with you and your life and all that in the midst of really an incredible place that has a very positive energy and is very spiritual.
One way or the other, I mean, we will continue to enjoy Nepal. Whether we get to go higher or if we have to go down lower, we will continue to enjoy Nepal.
I'm enjoying it, besides all this.
This is a very beautiful place with big mountains.
Nice people.
Nice people. The people are very, very nice.
It was quite tiring to get up, but when you see this view, you forget everything. It's great. It's really great.
When I go back home, I think I'll be a little bit different because I'll work less hours. I'll probably give more money to charity. I'll perhaps try and get a time when I can bring my family back here and we can share the experience together and perhaps be a little bit less materialistic.
If you really want to meet yourself, do something like this.
Put life in perspective
you worry less about the small things when you realise what a big, sort of beautiful world you're part of.
Nepal touches people deeply, calling many travellers to return again and again. The goal of the Himalayan Rescue Association is to reduce the number of altitude-related deaths of trekkers and porters to 0. This can only be done when trekkers prepare themselves, loosen their itineraries, and look out for each other and for their porters. The Himalayas have been here for millions of years. For those who have to turn around, the mountains will still be there next time. And for a wise pilgrim, it's the journey in the end that matters.
यो माटीको चौडा भने आगोले नै खान्छ धनञ्जय वायुले प्राणलाई लिएर जान्छ